The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop carrying the weight of Marcus Chen's exhaustion. His calloused hands gripped the steering wheel as he navigated the flooded streets of downtown Cleveland, the familiar ache in his lower back reminding him of another 14-hour day beneath the hoods of broken-down cars. At 42, Marcus had spent more years under fluorescent garage lights than he cared to count. His dreams of engineering, college long buried beneath the practical need to keep food on his own table. The emergency call had come in just as he was locking up. Chen's Auto Repair, a stranded family on the east side, their minivan dead in the parking lot of Cleveland Clinic's Children's Hospital. Marcus had every reason to ignore it. The storm was getting worse. His arthritis was flaring up, and his own empty apartment awaited him with leftover Chinese takeout and the Cubs game he'd recorded. But something in the dispatcher's voice, a note of desperate urgency, made him grab his toolbox and head back into the night. When Marcus pulled up to the hospital, he spotted them immediately. A woman in her 30s pacing frantically beside a burgundy Honda Odyssey, while a man in scrubs, clearly just off his shift, stood helplessly with the hood up, rain soaking through his thin hospital uniform. But it was the small figure pressed against the van's window that stopped Marcus cold. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, her face pale as moonlight, watching the adults with the kind of old soul weariness that no child should possess. "Thank God you're here," the woman called out, rushing toward Marcus as he climbed from his truck. "I'm Sarah Martinez, and this is my husband, Dr. James Martinez. Our daughter, Emma," her voice broke, and she gestured toward the van where the little girl sat wrapped in a hospital blanket. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, extending a wet hand. "The van just died. Emma's been in treatment for leukemia, and we're supposed to get her home for her medication schedule. The storm knocked out most of the cab services and—" "Let me take a look," Marcus interrupted gently, already moving toward the van. He'd learned long ago that in moments of crisis, action spoke louder than words. As he bent over the engine, Marcus felt tiny eyes watching him. The little girl had rolled down her window despite the rain, and when he glanced over, she offered him a small wave. Her head was covered by a colorful knit cap that couldn't quite hide the fact that she'd lost her hair to chemotherapy, but her smile was pure sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Hi there," Marcus said softly. "I'm Marcus. What's your name?" "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Are you going to fix our car?" "I'm sure going to try, sweetheart." The diagnosis was grim. A blown alternator, and Marcus didn't have the right part in his truck. The nearest auto parts store was 20 miles away and had closed hours ago. He straightened up, wiping his hands on an old rag, preparing to deliver the bad news to Emma's parents. "The alternator's shot," he told them. "I can get you sorted out first thing tomorrow morning, but tonight—" Sarah's face crumpled. "Tomorrow might be too late. Emma's white blood cell count has been dropping, and she needs her medication on a strict schedule. If we miss even one dose—" "Mom, it's okay," Emma called softly from the van. "Really, I'm okay." But Marcus could see she wasn't okay. Even from here, he could tell the little girl was fighting to stay strong for her parents, the way kids do when they've seen too much of hospitals and treatments and worried adult faces. It was a look he recognized from his own childhood, when his father had worked 3 jobs to keep their family afloat, and Marcus had learned to swallow his own needs to avoid adding to the burden. An idea began forming in Marcus's mind. Crazy, impractical, but maybe the only option they had. His own apartment was only 8 blocks away, close enough to walk even in this weather. It wasn't much, but it was warm and dry, and he could drive them home first thing in the morning once he'd fixed their van. "Listen," he said, the words coming out before he could second-guess himself. "My place isn't far from here. You could wait out the storm there, and I'll have you back on the road by 7 a.m. I know it's not ideal, but—" "We couldn't impose," Dr. Martinez started. But Sarah was already nodding, relief flooding her face. "James, Emma needs to get out of this cold. And if this gentleman is offering—" "Marcus," he said, "and it's no trouble at all." The walk to Marcus's apartment building was slow going. Emma's parents took turns carrying her, but Marcus could see the strain in their faces, the weight of a sick child and their own exhaustion. When they reached the building's front steps, Dr. Martinez was breathing heavily, and Sarah looked ready to collapse. That's when Emma, wrapped in her father's arms, turned to Marcus with eyes that seemed far too wise for her young face. "If you carry me up the stairs, I'll tell you a secret," she said quietly. Marcus looked at her parents, who nodded gratefully. The building's elevator had been broken for months, just another repair the landlord kept, promising to make. 3 flights of stairs stretched above them, and Emma's parents had already been carrying her for 8 blocks. "I'd be honored," Marcus said, gently taking the little girl from her father's arms. Emma weighed almost nothing, like holding a bird. As they climbed the first flight, she settled against his shoulder with a trust that made Marcus's chest tight. "So what's this secret?" he asked as they reached the second landing. Emma was quiet for a moment, and Marcus thought maybe she'd fallen asleep. Then her small voice whispered near his ear, "I heard Mommy and Daddy talking to the doctor today. They think I don't know, but I do." Marcus's stomach dropped, but he kept climbing. "What did you hear, sweetheart?" "The medicine isn't working as good as they hoped," Emma said matter-of-factly. "And we might have to try something else that's really, really expensive. Daddy's been working extra shifts, and Mommy cries when she thinks I'm sleeping." By the time they reached the 3rd floor, Marcus could barely see through the blur in his eyes. This little girl, fighting for her life, was worried about her parents' financial burden. It was so unfair, so impossibly cruel, that he had to stop for a moment to compose himself before unlocking his door. His apartment was sparse but clean, a bachelor's space with mismatched furniture and photos of classic cars on the walls. But it was warm and dry, and Sarah immediately began getting. Emma settled on the couch while Dr. Martinez called the hospital to update Emma's care team about the delay. As Marcus made coffee and heated up soup, he watched Emma's family. The way her parents moved around each other with practiced efficiency, the gentle way Dr. Martinez checked his daughter's temperature, the fierce protectiveness in Sarah's eyes, it reminded him of something he'd lost long ago. His own parents had loved him like that once, before life and bills and broken dreams had worn them down. While Emma dozed on his couch, Marcus found himself in quiet conversation with her parents. He learned that Dr. Martinez was a resident at the hospital, working 100-hour weeks to support his family and pay off medical school loans. Sarah had left her job as a teacher to care for Emma full-time. The experimental treatment their daughter needed wasn't covered by insurance and would cost more than Dr. Martinez made in a year. "We'll figure it out," Sarah said with the kind of determination that only mothers possess. "Somehow we'll find a way." Marcus excused himself and went to his bedroom, where he opened the drawer of his nightstand and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside were $15,000 in cash, his entire savings, money he'd been putting away for years with some vague notion of maybe, someday, going back to school. He'd been 42 years old with the same dream for 20 years. Maybe it was time to invest in a different kind of future. When he returned to the living room, Emma was awake, watching her parents with those 2 old eyes. "Mr. Marcus," she said softly, "can I tell you another secret?" He knelt beside the couch. "Of course." "I'm not scared for me," she whispered. "I'm scared for them. If something happens to me, they'll blame themselves forever. And they shouldn't, because they're the best parents in the whole world." Marcus felt his heart break completely. This child, this impossibly brave little girl, was more worried about her parents' emotional well-being than her own mortality. In that moment, he knew exactly what he had to do. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Marcus had the van fixed and running by 6:30, and Emma's family was ready to head home, with a fresh supply of medications that Dr. Martinez had retrieved from the hospital. As they prepared to leave, Marcus handed Sarah a manila envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Just something to help with Emma's treatment," Marcus said quietly. "Don't open it until you get home." Dr. Martinez extended his hand. "Marcus, we can't thank you enough. You've been an angel." Emma, looking slightly better after a good night's sleep and her morning medications, reached up for one more hug. "Mr. Marcus," she whispered, "want to know one more secret?" "Always. Angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they just have really kind hearts and dirty fingernails from fixing cars." As the Martinez family drove away, Marcus stood in his empty apartment, watching from the window until their van disappeared around the corner. His savings account was empty, his back still ached, and he had a full day of work ahead of him. But for the first time in years, Marcus Chen felt like the richest man in Cleveland. 3 months later, Marcus received a card in the mail. Inside was a photo of Emma, her hair starting to grow back in soft curls, grinning beside a banner that read, "Cancer-free." The note, written in a child's careful handwriting, said simply, "Thank you for carrying me up the stairs. Love, Emma." Marcus tucked the photo into his wallet, right next to his business cards. Some investments, he'd learned, paid dividends that couldn't be measured in dollars. They could only be measured in the weight of a child's trust, the tears of grateful parents, and the knowledge that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the largest ripples of hope. That evening, as Marcus locked up his garage, he noticed a young woman standing beside a broken-down car holding a crying baby. Without hesitation, he grabbed his toolbox and walked over. "Looks like you could use some help," he said. "After all, angels don't retire. They just keep finding new ways to spread their wings."